my name's Maggie Brown, and I'm the project director for the Suicide Prevention Grant at FRC. Today, we're going to talk about tips for family and friends after a loved one attempts suicide or has a suicidal crisis. We use the phrase suicidal crisis, and I don't think we've ever really defined what that means. So what a suicidal crisis might be is someone's had pretty intense suicidal thoughts and hasn't actually attempted suicide, but might have to go to the hospital or receive more intensive services to keep them safe. So these tips kind of apply in both scenarios. After a suicide attempt is when an individual is actually most likely to die by suicide and attempt suicide again. So it's really, really critical to wrap around them some support and love and additional services during that kind of critical time. So a couple of things that we want to talk about today. Kind of the most basic thing that we can do for a loved one after a suicide attempt is using the tools that we already have in our toolkit when someone is physically ill or has an accident or an emergency. Some of those things might be writing them a card, bringing them flowers, a meal, helping with chores, like mow their lawn for them, things like that. We already do those things when someone is sick or injured, and we can do those same things if someone has a mental health crisis or a suicide attempt. The biggest thing with that is don't just do nothing because you feel awkward or uncomfortable. We really would want to show folks that we're thinking of them, they're loved, we're there to support them, and so we can do those small things, like even just sending them a card that says we're thinking about them. One of the other things we can do after a suicide attempt is having a pretty direct, non-judgmental conversation about the attempt and what we can do to support them to prevent a future attempt. What we mean by non-judgmental is a suicide attempt might bring up some pretty intense feelings. You might think, oh my gosh, how could they have done that? That type of conversation isn't really that helpful. Coming at someone of like, how could you do this? It isn't helpful. It's going to cause a person to really shut down and feel like they can't come to you and they can't be honest about what's going on. So that's where the non-judgmental piece is pretty important. Some of the questions that you could ask that person are, what can I do to support you? If you're thinking about attempting suicide again, would you be willing to tell me? And if you're not comfortable talking to me about it, who can you tell? Let's figure out a plan of who you can tell if you're feeling this way again. Asking them again with what you can do to help, maybe even asking, can I take you to your next appointment? Or when are you seeing your therapist? Or what can I do to help make sure that those appointments and that follow-up care happens? The next thing that we can do to support a loved one after a suicide attempt is talk to them about what their safety plan looks like. A safety plan is a tool that individuals use with typically a therapist or a doctor or someone at the hospital or other provider might create with an individual on kind of what to do if they're starting to have escalated thoughts of suicide. A safety plan typically includes maybe some warning signs, so how they might be able to recognize that things are starting to feel bad and starting to feel worse. The other thing that a safety plan typically includes is kind of things that they can do that make them feel better. So maybe on that plan could be listening to their favorite music or doing a fun activity, maybe drawing pictures or journaling, things that can make them kind of help them calm down and feel a little bit better. A safety plan also typically includes kind of their natural supports and formal supports. So a list of kind of where you come in, friends and family that they can call when they're feeling bad or thinking about suicide, having the phone numbers of their therapist or other professionals that they're working with. And then ultimately, the safety plan should have on there a crisis hotline and 911 to remind them that if things are getting even worse and they feel like they're in imminent danger, they have that number right in front of them to call. So they should have the safety plan, and you as a friend or family member can talk to them about what that looks like. That way, if you might be observing some of those warning signs, you can remind them to reference back to their safety plan, maybe revisit their safety plan with them and kind of check in, like, does that seem to be working, or are there things that we could change on it that might be a better fit? So those safety plans are really important. The next thing you can do as a loved one is try to reduce the risks in the home, in the person's home. So me thinking about what is in the home that could potentially be dangerous or used in a suicide attempt. So maybe if there's weapons in the home, ensuring that those are locked up, or medications, having those locked up. If there's something that the individual has used in the past or talked about using in the past that they would use to attempt suicide, removing those items just to reduce risk and reduce kind of those opportunities that someone might attempt suicide. One of the final things that we wanted to touch on for after a suicide attempt is that you, as kind of the caregiver, might experience some distress yourself. And with this might come feelings of overwhelming feelings, guilt, shame, and it's really important that you take care of yourself during this time too. So the things that we've talked about so far are focused on how you can help this other person after the attempt. But it's really important also kind of you're taking care of yourself. So what are you doing for your own self-care? Reaching out to your own support system and friends and family when this caregiver role is getting kind of overwhelming. And we would encourage you that maybe seeking some professional support yourself, because this is a challenging time. And, you know, if you're kind of the primary person that's taking care of the individual who has attempted suicide, you want to increase their hope and provide them support and resources, and you need to make sure that you're really taking care of yourself and filling your cup too, so that you can continue to support that person. Really, kind of the biggest thing with all of this is just ensuring that your loved one feels supported, knows that you're there, and that they're loved, and there's someone that cares about them. That's really the best thing you can do. And if that's kind of the focus of your interaction with them, is just being there, letting them know that they're loved and that they're important, there's really if that's kind of the focus of your interactions, then you're not doing anything wrong. There's kind of no wrong way to provide that support. So just be there. That's really the best thing you can do, is really just be there for that person. In this post, we're sharing a link to a guide that SAMHSA created that's a little bit more lengthy, that's specific to how you can support a loved one after they've gone to the emergency room following a suicide attempt. So that's linked in this post, along with some local Hancock County resources. Thanks, everyone. Take care.